My depressed sister faked her own death and moved to Sweden to live in a cabin in the woods that she built herself. I desperately want to get her back. My sister spent the majority of her life depressed. Neither my parents nor I know what it stemmed from, but we do have suspicions that it was from the bullying she went through in school, and the fact that our uncle was convicted for roping her probably didn't help either. I remember she started hurting herself as early as 12 years old, and I desperately tried to get her help. I felt like I had failed at the time as an older brother, as no amount of talking to her one-on-one or therapy or counseling seemed to do anything to help her. One thing about my sister is that she loved nature and absolutely despised the prospect of growing up in a busy city while working a regular job. I remember the only time she seemed to be happy is when she would sometimes go on tangents about living in the wild, surrounded by animals and bird chirps in the mornings. I remember I suggested to my parents that perhaps we could move out of downtown New York, which is where we were living at the time, and maybe go to a more natural area in order to help my sister. They shut me down, saying they both had great jobs here and there was no way they were willing to give that up. They were convinced that my sister would grow out of her depression, but she never did. She actually only got worse. By the time she was 16 she was very depressed, routinely talking about not seeing a point in life and hating the monotony of day-to-day life in the city. I asked her if she wanted to travel with me. I was 19 at the time and was saving up money for an apartment of my own, but I figured I could set some money aside to make my sister happy. We ended up vacationing in Sweden, and for the 1 week that her and I were there, I had never seen her so happy. She literally smiled. That may not seem like a lot, but my sister never smiled, so this was a big deal. After returning from the holiday my sister would not stop talking about Sweden and about the scenery she saw there. She told me and my parents she wanted to move there when she was older, and when she talked about it I saw her eyes glow like never before. Sadly, my parents shut her down, saying she's only a 16-year-old and that life can't just be lived self-sufficiently in some remote part of Sweden, which is what my sister wanted. My sister fell deeper into her depression, which lasted over 2 years. She never showed signs of actually going through with suicide, however the worry was in the back of my mind. Until one morning I found a note she left in her room. It was her suicide note. She thanked me for the time in Sweden. I cried so much when I read it. She said she had thrown herself into the sea, because if she couldn't live surrounded by nature, she could at least die surrounded by it. I told my parents and instantly we informed the police, who tried long and hard to find her out in the sea. Unfortunately it was to no avail and we had a closed casket funeral. The grieving period was very hard on our family and I fell into a depression myself. My parents ended up quitting their jobs and starting a new life away from New York. I'll admit, I blamed them a lot. I told them on one occasion that my sister died because their stupid corporate jobs were more important than their daughter's life. They both cried when I said that, and I went up to my room. I knew what I said was wrong, but was I really wrong in what I said? My parents ended up separating within the next few years and I found life to be very hard, finding it impossible to get out of bed some days. For the longest time I searched the internet hoping my sister was still out there while being in deep denial of the fact she was gone, but I never had any luck. I still have her note and I keep it with me. It's my most cherished possession. Little did I know that the note I had would turn out to be the thing that brought backlight into this world. I read it obsessively, almost every single day. It was a very long note with many paragraphs, but the structure of them never made any sense to me. I tried to solve why the paragraphs were laid out so strangely, but never did. She ended her paragraphs in places she didn't need to end them in. She would literally run a sentence into the next paragraph. It almost seemed like she wanted to make each paragraph a specific length. I would count the lines over and over and look for dates or letters of the alphabet to spell something, but it never did. I had given up on trying to solve this non-existent mystery a while ago, when recently I found my answer. The length of her paragraphs corresponded with the effing coordinates of the place we visited in Sweden, which just happens to be a place she mentioned she wanted to live in. When I found that I started going berserk. I also found that if you put the second last letter of every line, with every last letter of every third line, she spells out a sentence about her building a cabin there for herself, but the words are jumbled up. I now know where she is. I have booked a plane ticket to go see her. I hope for the love of God this is real and I'm not crazy. I haven't told my parents yet in case I'm wrong and the false hope I gave them crushes them.